Hi guys, today we're going to do order of operations. So we're going to refresh our memories, I should say, back when we were younger and how we solve problems given order of operations. And then we're going to review just some sign numbers and absolute value things. We're going to refresh our skills at adding and subtracting fractions and how we do that. And we're also going to do multiplying and dividing fractions today. When you're doing these things, you're going to have to show your work. So definitely check in the calculator to make sure you've done it correctly. But we're also going to have to show our steps so that you get full credit when you're doing these things. All right, so there's how many steps to order of operations. So that's just a common question I ask people. How many steps do order of operations have? Actually, you might think 6 for PEMDAS, PEMDAS, but that's not true. That's not the number of steps. The actual number of steps are 4. The first one is parentheses. Step 2 is exponents. So usually I just write e squared. Third is multiply and divide. So this is combined to one step. It's whatever happens first, left to right. And fourth is add, subtract. Again, whatever happens first, left to right. So those are our 4 steps. For signed numbers, we just want to refresh our memories. When you're multiplying or dividing, you might remember this symbol. Some students have shown this to me in the past. It's a little trick to help you remember. A negative times a negative is positive. If you have a negative times a positive, then you're left with a negative. So when we multiply a negative times a negative, we get a positive. A negative times a positive, we get a negative. Any certain number of negatives, so if we have an even number of negatives, it always becomes positive. If we have an odd number of negatives, it becomes negative. And then when you're working at absolute value, we treat it like parentheses. So if we have a negative 3 plus 5, we just do the operations inside there first. So we get the absolute value of 2, which is 2. If we have 5 minus the absolute value of negative 7 plus 3, we would have 5 minus the absolute value of negative 4. Take the absolute value next. So 5 minus 4 to get 1. So that's just a little refresher on some absolute value. Try these 2, you try it, and then check your answers. I'll put them below. So try 1, 2, and 3, and then check your answers below. I'm going to go on to adding and subtracting fractions. So when we add subtractions, you may remember I'm spazzing all over, sorry. Step 1 is to get a common denominator. There's a few different ways we can find a common denominator. One is just to multiply the denominators together. That won't always give us the least common denominator, but it will help us. Or compare them and find the smallest number that they can all become. After you get the common denominator, you're going to multiply each by the top and bottom by that number. So first we're going to multiply the top and bottom to make sure that they match. I'll model that in a moment. We add the numerators or subtract. We keep the denominator. And then simplify if possible. So let's try a few of these. So for A, when we're comparing the 4 and the 16, the least common denominator would be 16. So we would have to multiply a 4 by what number to get a 16? So we'd have to multiply the 4 by a 4. So we do it to the top and the bottom. So that's what I mean by step 2. So we get 12 sixteenths plus 7 sixteenths. Now we're ready for step 3. We add the numerators. and we keep the denominator. You may keep it in that form. If you show that 4 over 4, that's showing your work. For B, we have 3/4 minus 5/6. So we're comparing them, saying what's our common denominator. So a 4 and a 6, you could multiply them together, you'd get 24, but then we'd have to simplify. Or you can go with a smaller number. So if we think of multiples of 6, it would be 6, then 12. A 4 can become a 12 also. So let's multiply the 3 by a 3, the 4 by a 3. That would give us a 12 in the denominator. 6 times 2 would give us a 12 here. So now we have 9 twelfths minus 10 twelfths is a -1 twelfths. When you're using your scientific calculator, use your fraction key, or we're going to use the ABC key. So to do the math here, you would do 3 ABC 4 minus 5 ABC 6, and then hit enter, and it should tell you that the answer is -1 twelfths. So just to do your check, that's what it would look like on the calculator. 3 ABC 4 minus 5 ABC 6, and it would give you a check to make sure you did it correctly, which I always recommend, and we should get -1 twelfth. For the next one, now we have 3, so we're comparing a 3, a 4, and a 5 to say what's the least common denominator. So take the two largest numbers, multiply them together. 5 times 4 is 20. Can 3 divide into 20? Nope. So then we might have to multiply them all together. 3 times 5 times 4 is 60, and I believe that's going to be our least common denominator. So we're going to try to make all of them into a 60. That means that the 3 needs to be multiplied by 5 and 4, which is 20. So we're doing 2/3 times 20 over 20. We're doing 3/5 times 4 times 3, so 12 over 12 to get a 60. And 3/4, so it's multiplied by the 3 and the 5, so that's going to be a 15 over a 15. So we're multiplying, we get 40 over 60 plus 36 over 60 minus 45 over 60. 40 plus 36 is 76. 76 minus 45 is 31. So we're left with 31 over 60. Again, feel free to type it into your calculator using your ABC key to check your math. Let's review now multiplying fractions. It's slightly easier for this one. You multiply the tops, multiply the bottoms. So let's use our math terminology. The tops of a fraction are called the numerators. Multiply denominators. And then simplify if possible. The thing about multiplying and dividing it, or multiplying fractions, is if you want, you can simplify, sorry, it should just be simplify if possible. So you can simplify before or after. I like to simplify first if I can. I'll show it both ways in example C. So for A, very simple, multiply across the top, we get 3, multiply across the bottom, we get 20. That's the answer. There's not really any work to be shown. For B, multiply across the top, we get 45, multiply across the bottom, we get 64. They don't have anything in common, it's done. For C, however, we could simplify this first. 4 goes into 16 how many times? So we can reduce on the diagonals, and then we get 3 over 20. That's going to make it easier, or we can do 12 over 16 times 5 is 80. And then we say these each have a 4 in common, so we can reduce them. 12 divided by 4 is 3, 80 divided by 4 is 20. So that's why I like to simplify first, because it's a little bit easier on the math. Then lastly, we're going to divide fractions. You probably remember back from the middle school that when you're dividing fractions, we do keep, change, flip, or we multiply by the reciprocal. So you keep the first fraction, change, divide to multiply, and you flip the second fraction. You can remember that keep, change, flip, or you can just multiply by the reciprocal. So in more advanced math terminology, it would be multiplied by the reciprocal. So we're going to rewrite 3/4 times 16/7. It's your choice, but I would look and say, can it be reduced? It can be. 4 goes into 16 4 times. Now I'll multiply across the top, 12/7. For B, rewrite it as 3/5 times 7/9. Reduce the fraction, and we're left with 7/15. And then the last one, now we have 3 steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite it as 2 multiplies. Multiply across the whole top. 2 times 4 times 6, or we can reduce if we want. I would probably reduce that to make it easier. 2 times 2 times 4 is 4 times 4, or 16/25. Nice work. I'll give you some practice problems to try. Try these, you try it, and I'll put the answers below.